Ladies and gentlemen, your Master of Ceremonies, Anthony Vaccaro.
All right, hello everybody. How's everyone doing tonight? Well, that's just super. There we go. Let's get it going. So nice to be here again this year. So many familiar faces. I see some Hall of Famers in attendance. There's a bit of a legends table over there. I see there's Pat Dillon and Maureen Jensen, Ed Thompson, to name just a few. There's many more. Norm Keevil, I believe, is here. Some new faces here as well. It's always important to see, get that next generation coming in, right? Norm, it looks like those new breakdancing videos that you're doing on TikTok are having their effect. They're getting those youngsters to come to these big events, right? You should all see Norm do the moonwalk. It's all Gucci, as the kids are saying. I just learned that one. It means cool for us old timers. Listen, it's very good to have occasions like this. We all get to get dressed up a little bit, polish off a few glasses. I myself am down to just drinking on 2 occasions, when I'm thirsty and when I'm not. And tonight I am thirsty, my friends, so here we go. Tonight's gala is coming at a very pivotal time in our society's evolution. It's not just about the mining industry in isolation anymore. As an industry, we find ourselves wrapped up in geopolitical and environmental issues, perhaps more than ever before, and that is really saying something, right? As the average Jane and the average Joe slowly wakes up to the fact that, hey, we might actually need some of this metal stuff if we're going to transition away from fossil fuels and foreign dependencies. We collectively have a unique opportunity to pull off a feat that is not often pulled off. It is perhaps, dare I say, the trickiest feat of all. Harder even than keeping a gold mine in Kyrgyzstan. It's going from the bad guys to the good guys. Now listen here, I'm part of this industry. I know we're not the bad guys, but we also know we got to be realists here. The entrenched position publicly is there's an uncomfortable reality that we have to accept, that we are. But who would have thought that we would have such a glorious opportunity to change that perception? Now, it's no easy task to pull this off, right? Just look at how rarely it is represented in pop culture. Sure, there's a litany of examples of good guys going bad. The public loves that. They love the fall from grace story. There's Anakin Skywalker. There's Walter White in Breaking Bad. Jack Torrance in The Shining. And no, that's not a picture of me during the COVID lockdown, although you might be forgiven for thinking so. Michael Corleone was an Italian-Canadian, one of my favorites when he was good, in The Godfather. Then there's Magneto, Harvey Dent, Saruman. It goes on and on and on. I don't know if it says something cynical about humankind or not. Do we just take pleasure in seeing the mighty fall? Or maybe it's something more fundamental. Are we all burdened with a certain fait accompli that inevitably the wood rots and the good goes bad? So when we as an industry have this task before us, we want to go the other way, right? That crosses society's wires a little bit. And I think it's why we don't see it often represented in the stories that we watch and that we read. And it also means that there's not a lot of inspiration out there for our industry to draw from. Now, there's a few. There's one that's already been mentioned, but he's dead before we can see whether it's believable or not. And let's face it, it's not the best look for a good guy. Then there's Apollo Creed, of course, but anything boxing kind of feels a little bit dated these days. Perhaps for me, the best example as it pertains to our industry is Royal Tannenbaum. For those who haven't seen the movie, Royal goes from being this fast-talking lawyer that concocts outlandish tales to get whatever he wants. We've never seen that in the junior space before, to being engaged in an unloving grandfather that learns to accept his appropriate place in his community. So, my friends, I submit to you that in our collective lifetimes, as an industry, This task is both our greatest challenge and also our greatest opportunity. We're going to need to awaken that courage, speak the truth, be proud of this industry so that we can confidently step through the opening that the march of history is presented before us here today. Now, fortunately for us, we do have 3 individuals here tonight that personify the qualities that can steer us in the right direction and help us change the perception of the world from seeing mining as something that's dirty and bad to what it really is, an industry that's at the core of civilization and will propel humankind to the next plateau. It's irrefutable. There's Jim Cooney. Jim built a career on understanding mining's broader impact on society. How ahead of the times was Jim Cooney, articulating our industry's opportunities and challenges in a way that was anything but typical. If you listen to Jim describe the mining industry, you will quickly realize this. He once said, I love this quote. This is what Jim said. This is what he loved about the industry. The mining industry is dealing with the more fundamental philosophical questions around the relationship between humankind and the material universe. How eloquent is that? It should come as little surprise that Jim's basic orientation has been described as being a philosopher. But Jim, from one philosophy grad to another, you're even more than that. Nietzsche, Kant, Hegel, they never figured out how to get a real job. You did. And you're thinking around social license to operate, a phrase that Jim coined. Think about how much we all use that now. We should be paying him a royalty. Was a key piece to plaster securing and building some of the incredible assets in the developing world. And then Barrick, driven largely by our other inductees' insistence, acquired those assets from Placer in a $10 billion acquisition back in 2005, securing for Barrick some of the key assets that made it into the powerhouse that it is today. Maybe that's what we need more of to pull off this great feat of going from bad to good. In addition to the broad understanding that Jim represents, we need some of that no-nonsense attitude to go in there and get her done. And it's a mentality personified by Alex Davidson. Alex, for me, you're like the Shohei Ohtani of mining. You excelled at exploration, making some world-class discoveries for Barrick, and then he excelled in a corporate development role, driving some key acquisitions and divestments for the company. Alex is all about drive and high-level execution. What is it with these Montreal guys? They always have this bit of this edge, don't they? This kind of tough and scrappy thing. Alex's first gig was washing windshields on cars for people that maybe didn't feel that their windshields needed to be cleaned. But he cleaned them, and they paid. Now we can get Alex on that alliance of Hall of Famers made up of Ross Beatty, Pierre Lassonde, Robert Friedland, who have valiantly gone on the record in Tech's defense. I mean, if we're serious about going from bad guys to good guys, who has a better chance of representing our industry, I ask you? Norm Keevil, Don Lindsay, and Tech, or Glencore? Just a question. Just a question. I just put it out there. Maybe we need an emissary to complement Alex's hard-nosed style. Someone who's learned the Canadian traits of politeness, kindness, and humility. We can send in Doug Silver, an American who has done so much for the Canadian mining industry, in no small part due to his trait of always learning. Learning the natural earth, learning the culture codes of the places that you've been in, and learning how to use data to make the best decisions possible. During Doug's time running Balfour Holdings, he was the go-to source for solving the big issues that companies brought him, and then went on to so many other great things in his career that we'll hear more about tonight. But I think we're going to need a data nerd as well if we're going to do this. Now, maybe nerd is too harsh for someone that's going into the Hall of Fame, but Doug's idol growing up was the professor from Gilligan's Island, so I mean, so if we as an industry can harness these traits of listening and understanding, of excellence in execution, and of always learning, we can also address some of the headwinds that we as an industry do create for ourselves at times. Because if we're going to pull this off, the first thing we really need to make sure we do is take care of our own house. So we can have less of companies making headlines, I hate to say it, but for blowing up indigenous caves or for dropping radioactive capsules off the back of a truck. Actually, I don't know why I used the plural there. That's just one company. And more companies grabbing headlines for leading the world into a brighter and cleaner future, right? Now, with regards to the former, the caves and the capsule things, just as a little sidebar, it does make me wonder a little bit. While many applauded Rio Tinto for its transparency when it released that report that fessed up to many faults at its operations, is it possible maybe that the top brass read the report and thought, hey, we come out looking pretty good in this. Let's call down to marketing. I don't know. Now listen, if anything I have said, especially at the end there, has caused any offense tonight, I abdicate all responsibility as ChatGPT wrote every single word of it. So take your complaints to Microsoft, not to the Northern Miner. All right. We'll learn more about the leadership and the incredible careers of the newest members as we watch their amazing tribute videos in a few minutes. But right now, I'd like to invite to the stage Janice Zinck. Janice is the chair of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame and executive director of Geoscience and Mines with the Department of Natural Renewable Resources in Nova Scotia. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous. It is my pleasure to join you this evening at my first dinner and induction ceremony as the chair of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. A special thank you to each and every one of you for joining us this evening as we recognize three remarkable individuals. Since 1989, the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame has recognized 200 exemplary leaders who have made significant and lasting contributions to our industry. I'd like to give a special warm welcome to our Canadian Hall of Fame members we have with us here tonight. Ed Thompson, Norman Keevil, Patricia Dillon, Maureen Jensen, Ebe Shirkus, Philip Mackey, and Mac Watson. Sadly, this year, we lost one of our members, Norman Patterson, who passed away last December, a month short of his 97th birthday. Norm was a giant in the field of modern-age exploration geophysics and is missed as an excellent ambassador of our industry. Our 200 members have set new standards of excellence, supported Canada in becoming a global leader in mining, and inspired pride in our collective contributions to Canadian society. Together, they have paved the way for the incredible time that we currently face as an industry. We all know that responsible mining is at the forefront of the world's energy transition, and here in Canada, we are well positioned to discover, develop, and deliver the required minerals and metals to global markets. Some say we are poised for a gold rush of critical minerals, a generational opportunity made possible by the 200 members of our Hall of Fame who have built the mining sector into what it is today. Our federal and provincial governments, and indeed like-minded countries around the world, are taking notice of our industry. In December 2022, the Government of Canada released the Critical Minerals Strategy, backed by nearly $4 billion in investment and a further $10 billion in significant tax credits. And just 2 months ago, U.S. President Joe Biden spoke to our parliamentarians in Ottawa about the incredible opportunity our two countries have to work together to build reliable and resilient supply chains, essential to our green and clean energy future. So tonight, with great hope on the horizon, we look to the future as we celebrate 3 new members of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame: Jim Cooney, Douglas Silver, and Alex Davidson. As a non-miner in the mining world, Jim Cooney championed his strongly held convictions of sustainable development and pioneered improvements in social and environmental performance of mining as it adapted to changing times. His work helped to position Canada as the leader in responsible mining that we are today. The career accomplishments of Douglas Silver reflect mutual benefits of wealth-generating opportunities across the Canadian and U.S. border. Silver launched the Denver Gold Group, one of the world's leading investment forums for precious metal producers that features a dominant contingent of Canadian-listed companies. And finally, Alex Davidson is a modern-era geologist who productively pursued mineral wealth here in Canada and around the globe. From 1993 to 2009, he contributed to the remarkable success of Barrick Gold as it grew from a North American base into the world's leading gold producer. Now, as we welcome these 3 leaders into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, we are incredibly grateful to our sponsors who help us capture, preserve, and share these stories. Thank you.
The Canadian Mining Hall of Fame would like to thank our visionary sponsors. Agnico Eagle. Agnico Eagle is a senior Canadian gold miner that has been producing precious metals since 1957. Recognized globally for its leading environmental, social, and governance practices, Agnico is a partner of choice within the mining industry. Thank you to Agnico Eagle for hosting tonight's cocktail reception.
We are Agnico Eagle. We've been making mining work for over 60 years. How? By treating people and communities with respect, improving safety and environmental performance through innovation, by never settling on the status quo. It's about forging partnerships that make us stronger so that we can seize opportunities tomorrow. At Agnico Eagle, that's how we make mining work.
Thank you to Franco-Nevada. Franco-Nevada Corporation is the leading gold-focused royalty and streaming company with the largest and most diversified portfolio of cash flow producing assets. Its business model provides investors with gold price and exploration optionality while limiting exposure to cost inflation. Thank you to Franco-Nevada for hosting tonight's after-dinner networking reception.
Franco-Nevada is delighted to sponsor the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame.
Thank you to Hatch. Hatch partners with their clients to tackle their toughest challenges in the metals, energy, and infrastructure sectors. Celebrating 7 decades of exceptional customer service. Thank you to Hatch for tonight's dinner wine.
All right, now let's do what we're all here to do. Absolutely. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you. This is what we're all here to do. Honor greatness and induct 3 incredible individuals into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. Our first inductee this evening is Jim Cooney. Please enjoy this tribute video and we'll learn more about Jim's astonishing career.
For more than 40 years, Jim Cooney has been a mining industry leader internationally and has made significant innovative contributions to the social and environmental performance of the mining world. His background as a philosopher, political scientist, and specialist in Chinese literature provided him with the intellectual framework to pioneer the application of sustainable development.
I thought I might end up working as a research scholar in the Asian Library at the campus of University of British Columbia, where I was based at the time. And then I saw a Cominco advertisement for an information analyst. And it looked intriguing. They wanted somebody that would do general research in libraries to answer questions that people that were doing strategic planning in the company might have. And basically they were looking for an outsider.
In 1976, Jim Cooney joined Cominco as a member of a strategic planning team with responsibilities for assessment of social and political risk.
It became very clear to me that mining companies are in some respects moral actors, and everything they do really has ethical consequences in terms of the impact on the environment or society in general or particular communities, and certainly the impact on the economy.
Tasked to research the relationship between mining companies and communities, his approach was to listen, learn, and engage with communities and non-governmental organizations, a substantial innovation at the time.
His ability to cut through a whole lot of the complexity, the real focal point of any particular discussion. That's his intellectual capacity, and it comes in part from his background, from his training, from his formation. Having acquired a very high level of skill in 2 quite complicated languages, English on the one side and Mandarin Chinese on the other.
My first assignment was to go to Tanzania, and that was to be my first in-country information gathering exercise in preparing country risk assessment studies.
With the appointment of John Wilson as CEO of Placer Dome in 1993, Cooney found himself working with an executive who shared an understanding that the industry had to change in order to survive the social and political pressures at the time. He was sent to Tanzania because of his unique perspectives.
A perspective that might be very different from the common wisdom that most business people picked up from their usual business contacts. So this again was where I was bringing sort of the outsider to the inside in the company.
Jim was inspired by the publication of Our Common Future, the 1987 report of the Brundtland Commission that formally introduced the world to the concept of sustainable development. In 1992, the United Nations convened the Conference on Environment and Development at Rio de Janeiro, known as the Earth Summit, and Jim was disappointed that there were no mining companies present.
That's when I really started paying attention to sustainable development, not so much as a vision that I would espouse initially, but a doctrine that was gaining force and was going to affect public policy in many arenas, particularly Canada.
Cooney took note that while NGOs and communities were embracing the language and philosophy, mining risked being left behind and adrift in a changing policy environment.
There was resistance to sustainable development when I first proposed it.
Jim began to focus on the challenge of getting mining and sustainable development onto the same page. As a result, in 1997, Placer Dome adopted a corporate sustainable development policy, amongst the first of its kind not only in the mining industry, but amongst all industries.
Because in order to get the environmental, the social, and the economic dimensions treated equally, you needed to have a process of decision-making that engaged the representatives of those 3 different dimensions equally.
He had figured things out. It became easy for the Placer Dome board to accept it and for it to enable us to become leaders.
Jim first used the term social license to operate at a meeting of the World Bank to explain the challenge of countering a new and rapidly rising form of political risk to the mining industry, the risk of conflict with host communities.
Jim's idea of social license to operate has gone viral, well beyond the industry. But his contribution is much more. It's not only his intellectual power that has made such a difference, but also his way of interacting with others, a way that is marked by respect, quiet diplomacy, and deep integrity. These are the characteristics of relationship building that are needed by mining if it is to succeed in today's world.
You look today just in Canada towards sustainable mining initiatives of the Mining Association of Canada, at the initiatives of the Prospectors and Developers Association, of the CIM's approaches to sustainable development mining. All the industry associations in Canada are aligned, and the International Council on Mining and Metals has made tremendous progress in developing guidelines for all sorts of areas such as relationships with Indigenous communities, respect for human rights, protection of biodiversity, and so forth. So the industry's come a long way.
Jim has worked tirelessly to ensure that the mining industry continues to evolve towards sustainable development and social license, including Indigenous license by obtaining free prior informed consent from Indigenous peoples. We are grateful for his contribution.
When Confucius was asked, what is the key issue, what's the key practice for good governance? And he says, use the right words. He says, if the words are not right, the discussion will not be productive. If the discussion is not productive, the decisions will not be effective, and affairs will not succeed.
We have to recognize that the work that Jim has accomplished to date has been very, very important, and it's to his credit that we are where we are today.
Pastor Dole at that time, Henry Breho was part of that management team, and there are various other people working with John Wilson as their CEO. They wanted to do this. They could see the benefit to be accrued from this. They hadn't seen it immediately. It was a learning process. They learned a lot of this together, but they had a guide who had the language and the foresight and the persistence to take them there. That was Jim.
Jim Cooney's visionary leadership and multidisciplinary background have left an indelible mark on the Canadian mining industry. His pioneering work in sustainable development and the popularization of the term social license to operate have revolutionized the industry's approach to social and environmental responsibility. Jim's legacy serves as a reminder of the importance of responsible mining practices and the impact that a single individual can have on an entire industry.
Pierre Gratton, the President and CEO of Mining Association of Canada. Pierre, I know Jim had such a big impact on the great work that you've done with the MAC towards sustainable mining, and there could be no one better than to introduce Jim than you.
Thanks, Anthony. So, what a career, Jim. I heard that before you entered the mining industry, you were considering writing a dissertation on linguistic issues, translating the Buddhist sutras from Sanskrit into Chinese during the Tang dynasty of the 5th, 6th, and 7th century. You've said that as you reflected on it, it probably would have led to a life of unemployability. On the plus side, you would have avoided the ups and downs of the mining cycle. However, China's a bit out of fashion at the moment, whereas mining and critical minerals are all the rage. I'm one of many here tonight, as Anthony just indicated, who consider Jim a mentor. I recall fondly when I became CEO of the Mining Association of BC, how Jim gave me the idea of my first address to the Vancouver Board of Trade on how our sector's complexity calls for an immense diversity of talent, including even theologians and linguists like Jim Cooney. I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that towards sustainable mining, which now is being implemented in 13 countries worldwide and continues to expand, would not have been possible if there hadn't been a Jim Cooney laying the groundwork for all of this work. So Jim, welcome to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, and please join me on stage to accept your award.
The answers, my friend, are blowing in the wind. Once sustainable development and social license were just blowing in the wind. I won't say what the answer to which questions they were. I'll talk about that tomorrow, but here we are, and I am deeply moved by this honor. To me, this event tonight symbolizes that I am no longer a non-miner in the mining industry. My transformation from non-miner to miner is complete. So let me formally address you as fellow miners. And other distinguished guests. First, I want to thank the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame for this honor. It is particularly meaningful to me that the Mining Hall of Fame is housed in the Royal Ontario Museum. It reminds me of when I was studying Asian languages and cultures at the University of Toronto in the late 1960s. In those days, I spent many hours at the ROM, wandering through the galleries devoted to China and South Asia. Some of my fellow students remained in Asian studies, and they ended up working at the ROM, curating museum exhibits. That might have happened to me. Instead, I joined the mining industry, and now I am becoming a museum exhibit. An exhibit in the gallery of rocks and minerals. Thankfully, I suppose, it's not in the gallery of dinosaurs. Now, many people have made this moment possible, but most especially my wife, Pat, and my 3 children, Alita, Liam, and Adrian. Unfortunately, my wife, Pat, cannot be here today because of illness, but my 3 children are at my table. They were the primary motivators of my career in the mining industry, inspiring me to do whatever I could think of to stay employed. So eventually, I started thinking of sustainable development and social license, and it worked. I kept my job. Now let me say a few words about those concepts. Sustainable development essentially means that the economic, environmental, and social dimensions of any industrial activity, but I think most especially mining, are equally important and must be continuously rebalanced and reintegrated, always with a focus on the long-term well-being of humanity and the planet. In practical terms, this means that the mining industry must engage in a never-ending effort to find compromise and build consensus with those whose values and priorities differ from ours. It means we must repeatedly set stretch targets for our social and environmental performance and achieve those targets. And a mine's social license to operate can then be understood as an outcome of sustainable development. I was alone in the mining industry when I advocated for sustainable development and when I introduced social license. But I did not stay alone for long. Others, both in the industry and outside, At first, a few, and then many, took these concepts and advanced their meaning in theory and their application in practice. Some of those closest to me are present here this evening at my tables, at the Mining Association table, and perhaps at other tables. They include representatives not only of the mining industry, but also of government, academia, consultancies, non-governmental organizations, and religious institutions. One person who is not here tonight, I must mention by name. He was also mentioned in the video. That's John Wilson, Placidome CEO from 1993 until 2000. He very much wanted to be here, but was unable to travel. Without John Wilson's encouragement and ultimately his enthusiasm, my contribution could not have occurred. I feel proud, very proud, that Placidome became the first mining company to embrace sustainable development and social license, and that so many other mining companies, individually and through their industry associations, have followed suit. This industry's ability to redefine itself and adapt to changing expectations and demands is truly extraordinary. I consider myself fortunate indeed to have been part of the mining industry for so many years. I benefited immensely from knowing and working with many wonderful people. Without them, my thinking, though it might have been visionary, would have remained inconsequential. So honoring all those who helped to turn the vision into reality, I humbly and happily accept induction into the Mining Hall of Fame, a non-miner no longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, for that incredible speech and your incredible contribution to such an important aspect to our industry that wasn't being thought of at the time. And congratulations. Before we get to our next inductee, I'd like to have you all turn your attention to the screen.
Thank you to our champion sponsor, Teck. Teck is one of Canada's leading mining companies, focused on providing products that are essential to building a better quality of life for people around the globe.
Our next inductee this evening is Doug Silver. Please enjoy this video on Doug's groundbreaking career.
Douglas Balfour Silver is an icon of the international mining industry. His numerous successes are a result of his data-driven mindset, intellectual curiosity, and creative thinking.
Unfortunately, I have a genetic disorder that I got from my mother, which is I'm infinitely curious. So I've switched about 5 or 6 times in different aspects of the mining industry, always because it just sounded more interesting or it was new and I wanted change. Change is good, and I've always benefited from the change.
Over his long and diverse career, he has made significant contributions to Canada by having produced mineral discoveries, resolved disputes, built companies, create wealth, and along the way, enhanced the careers of Canadian mining professionals.
Douglas graduated with majors in zoology and geology before pursuing his master's degree in economic geology at the University of Arizona.
Part of the master's degree, you had to do a thesis, and what they wanted you to do is combine field work with lab work. So I did the thermodynamic modeling of a scheelite deposit in southern Arizona, and I'm still waiting on the movie rights.
As an exploration geologist, he was one of the principal discoverers of the Silver Creek molybdenum deposit in Colorado. This led to his promotion to Anaconda's acquisition team, the first of its kind in the industry.
Unfortunately, it was very deep and it was very hot down there, so it was never developed into a mine, but it was exceptionally high-grade moly deposit. And back then, we didn't have computers. We were drawing isometric diagrams by hand and cross-sections, and we spent 8 months one winter trying to figure out where it was, and we figured it out and discovered it.
His focus then shifted away from geology and fieldwork to valuations. Doug went on to become one of the foremost authorities in mineral economics, mineral appraisals, mining valuations, and mine financing. As a certified mineral appraiser, Doug built a global reputation with his own company, Balfour Holdings. His databases were cutting edge and systematically tracked all commodity acquisitions.
I love the idea that you could take an intangible thing like a mineral deposit and you could figure out how to mine it and process it, and then you could figure out how to price that for purposes of buying or selling the asset. So when the industry had its downturn, I decided to go back and get a formal education in appraisal theory so that I could do a better job.
Doug initiated numerous high-profile mineral asset valuations and corporate transactions, as well as provided expert testimony at U.S. Senate hearings.
And at the time, I don't think there were 5 people in the world that had both a mining background and an appraisal background. And so what happened is my consulting company, Balfour Holdings, became a premier place for people to get appraisals because I had this dual skill set. It was a marvelous way to be very heavily embedded in the acquisition and merger business. And as far as I can tell, my valuations were always correct.
Douglas also supported Canadian mining through the Denver Gold Group, which he conceptualized and founded in 1989 to introduce gold companies to gold institutional investors. The DGG has long been dominated by Canadian-listed companies, and its annual conference continues today as one of the world's principal forums for gold investment discussion.
The majority of public mineral companies are listed on the Canadian stock exchanges. So anybody put on a mining investment conference, the majority of the companies attending will be Canadian. It caught on like wildfire, and now we've been doing it for over 30 years, and it's the foremost gold thing, and it's marvelous to attend because you get to see all the CEOs, get to see the biggest fund managers, and everybody's trying to figure out what gold's going to do and how we're all going to make money on it.
Throughout his career, Douglas has been a tireless supporter of higher education in the minerals sector. Through his personal financial contributions, the mentoring of students, and his support of women in the industry.
It never made sense to me about this glass ceiling that women weren't allowed to penetrate. Women can multitask. Well, you know, one industry that needs multitasking is mining. We're seeing a lot more women CEOs, we're seeing a lot more women on boards, but it's been long overdue. And I did what I could to break that glass.
I've spent the last 20 years navigating the mining industry, and I can assure you that I have crossed paths with very few people like Doug Silver. He appreciates the different challenges women face and has supported many of us with an uncanny level of empathy.
Douglas's biggest contribution to Canada was in the mineral royalty and streaming sector, with the creation of International Royalty Corporation. IRC was the first royalty company to actively chase non-precious metals royalties.
Anytime there's a press release by a junior company, any company, about their option agreements, about their properties, about their royalties, he would file that away. He would put it in his database, and over the years he had a massive collection of all of these royalties throughout North America, probably the world, mainly in Canada, because many of them are in Canada. And with that, he was able to start putting together a portfolio which eventually became IRC.
When Doug Hurst and I and George Young took International Royalty public, we used Faskins as our legal counsel, and they basically served as our legal department, and we did over 80 transactions with them.
He's doing this massive IPO, and it was amazing. He was so involved in the transaction. He spent so much time up in the Toronto office. This was before the virtual days when everyone would be on video conference. He was up here in person, back and forth from Denver, part of the team here at the office, working late nights. I think we had boardrooms that were, designated for Doug Silver. I think he felt like he was part of the Faskins team.
2 years later, they sold IRC to Royal Gold, following a bidding war. After taking time off to perfect his fly fishing craftsmanship, Douglas joined Orion Resources with a mandate to build another royalty portfolio. Titheco was ultimately sold to Osisko for $1.1 billion Canadian, making it one of the largest royalty transactions ever.
The thrill you get from making a major mineral discovery it's like nothing else in the world. But what it did was put me on a path of thinking about doing things first. Your life is actually a series of firsts.
Douglas enjoyed a career of firsts, and the Canadian mining industry greatly benefited by his successes.
He was inducted to the U.S. Mining Hall of Fame a number of years ago, and I attended that with a number of my colleagues. And it was at that event that I thought, he needs to be in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, not just the U.S. Hall, because he has done so much for Canada. Anybody that knows Doug knows about his incredible sense of humor. Nancy Eastman and I both got emails from Doug, and he said, I've just received this attachment from the Ontario Securities Commission. I think I need some lawyers to represent me. And I was thinking, oh my God, if he's being investigated by the Ontario Securities Commission, this is going to really ruin his chances for the Hall of Fame induction. I opened the attachment, and it's the letter saying you have been inducted to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. So that was Doug's idea of a good joke.
If he's not preparing, if he's not writing something, he's got a couple of books he's working on, he's got all these ideas for the next project. He has a passion for collecting information. And a lot of his presentations that he makes, he's very thought-provoking, and he looks at things from a different point of view.
A visionary looks forward, right? But that's not how you become a visionary. It's done in reverse. So I don't view myself as a visionary. I just view myself as curious.
Everything Douglas Silver touches turns to gold. His impressive contributions to the advancement of the mining industry in Canada live on. And he continues with philanthropic support for advancing minerals education and careers in mining.
For Doug, it all started with a hole in the ground. His great-grandfather was a mining engineer. After discovering a gold mine in Pierce, Arizona, he heard about a prospect near Flagstaff. So he headed out there, and he found a big hole in the ground with origins unknown. After some research, he concluded it was a meteor crater, and that below it would be massive riches of nickel and iron. What he didn't know, Doug told me, was that the meteor vaporized on impact and his fortune disappeared down a failed mining shaft. And while that hole was empty of physical metal, it did prove to be the fuel for a great future career. Doug's interest in geology was ignited by a desire to learn about this hole in the ground that his family still owned. And if there's a royalty business to be made out of meteors hitting the Earth's surface, Doug, I think you're the one that's going to be able to crack it. Welcome to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, Doug. Come on up.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been a closet Canadian for decades. So this is my coming out party. There are more public mineral and mining companies in Canada than anywhere else in the world. So this being the highest honor in Canada is in fact the highest honor in the international mining industry. This is like the Nobel Prize of mining. No, better than that. It's like winning an Olympic gold medal in hockey. And dare I say, against the Americans. I'd like to thank Mike Barassa for spearheading my nomination on a non-billable basis, and for all the wonderful people who wrote support letters for me. I'd like to thank the Northern Miner for being my sponsor and for family and friends who have come so far on my behalf. I'd also like to thank my ex-wife. She raised our kids and ran our household, and that allowed me the freedom to do what I needed to do to be successful. And I think a lot of times recipients of awards don't appreciate what their significant others do for them. So thank you, Donna. And for all the significant others, regardless of pronoun, thank you.
We're going to turn our attention now to the video screen once again.
The Canadian Mining Hall of Fame would like to thank our gold sponsors, Barrick and Haywood Securities. Thank you to our silver sponsors, BMO Capital Markets and Magris Performance Materials.
And for our final award this evening, please enjoy this video on the indomitable Alex Davidson.
Alexander John Davidson is legendary in Canada as a business leader and explorer who discovered some of the world's largest mineral deposits. Born in Montreal, Alex graduated from McGill University in 1976 with a Master's of Science degree in Economic Geology.
Geology 101 elective course description, rather, was very well written and had earthquakes and gold mines and volcanoes and all those kind of fun things in it, and it sounded way better than biology or something like that.
My love of exploration only intensified in my second summer in the bush when I was posted to northern Quebec to a fly camp with two Indigenous guys.
And they taught me how to catch a rabbit with a snare, fish with hook and line, never wash because soap attracts mosquitoes, black flies, and deer flies, and also how to strike a tent and put up camp in the rain and everything like that. It was an invaluable exercise.
In early 1979, Alex worked for the Saskatchewan Mining Development Corporation, which became Cameco, looking for uranium deposits in the Athabasca Basin.
It wasn't unusual to see a whole band, a whole group of school children, led by my wife and the other teachers, outside my office, which made for very fun dinner-time conversations.
After several successes in Canada, Davidson joined Barrick Gold in 1993 and became part of a top-tier team led by Peter Monk and Robert Smith, both members of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame.
I first met Alex as a candidate for Vice President Exploration at Barrick. I remember the interview pretty well. I think I offered him the job on the spot.
When I joined Barrick, it was a very small company but with big ambitions, and that's why we went down to Peru and then acquired Lag Minerals and so on. It was a very motivated team. It was a lot of fun to work there with Alan Hill, Bob Smith, and Peter, and then John Carrington.
I remember Alex as one of the key people that really helped grow Barrick from a moderate to large company into an international mining powerhouse. Alex had a front seat. He was so influential through exploration discoveries as well as through some of the corporate acquisitions that he spearheaded.
In 1994, Barrick's team in Chile discovered the Pascua deposit. Later, exploration across the border into Argentina led to the discovery of the Lama deposit, which became the Pascua Lama project.
Pascua turned out to be quite a large discovery after a number of years. The mineralization extended across the border into Argentina, and we built an exploratory tunnel from Chile to Argentina. That was called the Alex Tunnel.
Meanwhile, in Peru, Alex had built an exploration team that was in perfect position to acquire the Pierina property.
Alex had seen the potential of both Pierina and of Peru very early on.
and more importantly, had been able to sell his bold vision to Barrick's board in Toronto, convincing them to make $1 billion wager on 9 drill holes, something that seems astounding to me even today.
And from there came the joke, or the riddle of what does Barrick Gold and a Japanese golfer have in common? And the answer was both overpaid for 9 holes. Purina turned out to be much bigger than we had expected and was a great success.
Opportunities will get missed and risks will get taken unless you have someone that you can bounce an idea off of who has that experience and is able to say to you, this is what we should do and how we should do it, without the filter, and completely what you see is what you get in full transparency.
Alex's team was known for being able to make decisions quickly. One of Barrick's original visions was to act with a sense of urgency. There wasn't a lot of sitting around.
Making sure my team came home safe every day was a major concern.
I mean, I remember flying down to Peru to look for a geologist who was lost in the mountains, in the fog, and she was lost for 2 or 3 days. And I flew down to Peru, and we were all out there looking, and she was eventually found safe.
Alex and his team later discovered the Lagunas Norte deposit, which turned out to be even bigger than Purina. Alex spearheaded Barrick's $9.2 billion U.S. hostile bid for Placer Dome. Barrick acquired a dozen new mines and a strong grip on the Cortez Trend in Nevada.
Placer Dome had some fabulous assets. The hostile bid took from October till shortly before Christmas to close out. During that time, we made a deal with Goldcorp to sell the Canadian assets of Placer Dome to Goldcorp. I remember that phone call with Ian Telfer saying, do you want a piece of Placer? Barrick's CEO at that time was Greg Wilkins. Peter Monk was still chairman, and Greg and Darren Blazzuti and I formulated the Placer takeover. It was a great success.
We were both on the board together for quite some years. I think one of Alex's real strengths is that he can see the big picture and he can identify what really matters.
Davidson's achievements helped elevate the stature of Canadian mining at home and overseas, and earned him industry honors including the PDAC's Prospector of the Year Award, the CIM's A.O. Dufresne Award, and the SME's Charles F. Rand Gold Medal.
It was very rewarding to be awarded this on behalf of the rest of my team.
During his 16-year career at Barrick Gold, Alex contributed to the success of the company, growing to become the world's leading gold producer. Few modern-era geologists have experienced a more productive pursuit for mineral wealth than Alex Davidson. He continues to provide board-level experience to select companies and has chaired numerous board committees, always with an emphasis on safety.
But the one thing that is important that I've learned from Alex is that if you're promoting a culture of health and safety in an organization, that organization actually becomes optimized, it becomes more efficient, it actually becomes more profitable. So there is the elegance of doing things because it's the right thing to do to promote health and safety, but it also makes for better operations, makes for a better company as well.
Alex and his wife Jillian have provided an endowment of $1 million Canadian to sustain 2 education grants through the CIM for Indigenous students.
We want to make it easier for Indigenous students in Canada to get a post-secondary education. And Jillian and I, through this endowment, want to help those Indigenous students that are pursuing a career in the mineral industry.
Alexander John Davidson's exceptional achievements as an explorer and company builder have taken him across the globe, culminating in the discovery of some of the world's largest mineral deposits. With unparalleled success under his belt, Davidson has rightfully earned his place in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame as an accomplished member, representing the very best in the industry.
I'm now going to ask Robert Boyd, the President and CEO of Endurance Gold and a Director at the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, to come up and join me on stage here to present Alex with his award. Robert.
Thank you, Anthony. Wow, what an exceptional career of new wealth creation through grassroots discovery. I tried to ask Alex earlier how many ounces that involves, and he wouldn't tell me, being the modest man that he is, but it's probably at least 50 million ounces. This imagination and vision to recognize outstanding opportunities and the confidence to pounce when the opportunity arises. That's really the encapsulation of a career of a worthy inductee. Mining companies are often born from exploration success. Many of our sponsors are like that. But they cannot grow and prosper without motivated and successful exploration and acquisition teams. Barrick's exceptional growth through discovery and exploration-driven deals prospered with Alex guiding this dynamic team. As a fellow exploration geologist and one of many of the exploration executives that admired the growth of Barrick through his success, it's an absolute honor to present this award to Alex Davidson. Alex, welcome to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. Please join us on stage to accept your award.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. I'm truly honored and humbled to be up here tonight, and I have many people to thank. First of all, thank you to the board of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. It's a huge honor to join those who have gone before me, great leaders of the Canadian mining industry. I'd like to thank my nominator, Bob Schaefer, and also Rod Thomas and Robert Boyd for putting forward my nomination. To all of you who collectively wrote support letters for my nomination, to all of you here tonight, to all my colleagues, my mentors, and my supporters in my career, thank you so much. Without your guidance, your wisdom, and your encouragement, I wouldn't be standing here tonight. Thank you to the sponsors of this evening, especially Hecla Mining, tonight's legacy sponsor, who went through extraordinary lengths to get their gang here tonight. Thank you. To Peter, to Rob and Alan and Catherine, thank you for your very kind comments, and to Scott and Tara for putting together that video. To my kids, Sarah, Travis, and my kid-in-law, Alice, thank you for your support and love and patience over the years while I was out busily making air miles. Also, thank you very much for helping me spend them. I mentioned patience, and no one has had more patience and love for me than Jillian, my love, my rock of almost 50 years. Thank you. I've been very lucky to work with some great Canadian companies in my career. Saskatchewan Mining Development Corporation, of course, became Cameco, a great Canadian company and a strong protector of Canada's uranium resources, our green fuel of the future. Falcon Ridge Copper became Minova and then First Quantum, and I was mentored there by proud Canadians like Hall of Famer Mike Nucky. As VP Exploration, Mike had the uncanny ability to ask you the very question you never ever thought of, and then to lead you to the answer with a twinkle in his eye. I've tried to emulate Mike's style over the years, but I've never quite been able to get the hang of that twinkle. Bill James, John Carrington, Barry Simmons, and Dave Watkins were key parts of the CFC team, among many others. I was very fortunate to be recruited into Barrick in 1993 by Alan Hill. It was quite a rigorous process with successive interviews by Alan, by Brian Meikle, by Bob Smith, and by Peter Monk. And I remember being petrified going into that interview with Peter Monk, the legend. and because I have absolutely no recollection of the interview itself. I either did okay or I just bored him, but I got the job. The people and the teams in the Barrick offices around the world are too numerous to mention, but I owe a great deal of thanks to all of them. And they included the late Greg Wilkins, whom we still miss to this day. And all of you down here and at the event this evening, I'm very, very appreciative. Barrick remains a great Canadian company to this day, and there is no prouder Canadian than Peter Monk, a Hungarian immigrant. After I left Barrick, I had the pleasure of serving on the Yamana board, another great Canadian company just acquired by two others, Agnico Eagle and Pan American Silver. You know, Canadian mining has a rich history that spans well over a century, and it's made and continues to make significant contributions to the economic growth of Canada. It's also been a source of employment and a key driver of innovation, opportunity, technology, and sustainability. And as a mining professional, I'm proud to be part of an industry that has had such a positive impact on the lives of people, not only here in Canada, but around the world. Yes, we lost companies like Falconbridge Limited, like Noranda, like Inco, and Alcan, and that's too bad. But we didn't lose their ore bodies or their mines. They didn't move an inch. We didn't lose their people either. Some stayed, and some went on to create or staff new companies that have since found new mines. Companies like those I've already mentioned, as well as companies like B2Gold, Lundin, Wheaton, Alamos, Osisko, Pretium, Detour, Sabina, Victoria Gold, and many others. Here in Canada, we have an amazing ability to create new wealth with many new successful companies doing excellent exploration. Just think of how many new mining companies we've created and how many new mines we have found here in Canada since the Leafs last won the Stanley Cup. You saw mentioned in the video of the endowment that Jill and I set up to support Indigenous students who want to be in the mining industry. That's another way of keeping our mining industry alive here in Canada. With an education in mining, I think Indigenous youth can become strong proponents of and indeed leaders of its industry. But we have to provide the means for those students to get through their studies, and that's what this endowment is all about. And as an aside, the endowment we set up is open and welcome for additional infusions of capital from both individuals and or companies so they can provide more grants to more students who want to get involved in our industry. I'm committed to being an advocate for the Canadian mining industry and to working towards a more sustainable and prosperous future for our industry and for Canada. And as I look around you all here tonight, I'm confident, very confident, that the Canadian mining industry is still in very good hands. Thank you, merci, have a great evening, and remember, it's never too late to find an ore body.
What did I tell you about these Montreal guys? Did I not say it? Couldn't resist getting a dig in there about the Leafs, eh, Alex? Let me tell you, as a lifelong Leaf fan, all we need to do is get a GM, a coach, and a winning attitude, and maybe we'll be all right. We're almost there. We're almost there. All right. Listen, huge congratulations to Jim, to Doug, and to Alex. And here's to the next generation of Hall of Fame members. Now, while tonight showed me that, well, it certainly helps if your name is Janice Zinck or Doug Silver to have a metallic last name, the Jim Cooneys and the Alex Davidsons show us that you don't need to have a metallic last name to have an outstanding career. So I want everyone here to think about who has had an exemplary career in Canadian mining, metallic last name or not. Find the person you deem to be an extraordinary leader and nominate them. 2024 inductees will be announced this fall. Nominations for 2025 are going to open up next spring, and you can apply for this in partnership with our founding organizations, one that I have the honor of heading up, the Northern Miner, but also CIM. Angela's joined us here today. MAC, you've already seen Pierre, and of course, PDAC with the amazing Lisa McDonald. And our associate organizations, the AME, the mining associations of BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec. Please take special note that we're returning to our original January date. So for those of you that have marked that in the calendar, yes, we got a little bit derailed by COVID, but January of next year, we are back at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, which means we can make the umbrella, the tent, whatever metaphor you want, even bigger. We're going to have a big bash. It's going to be on January 11th, and we'll have a big celebration there. Thank you all for being here.
We'd like to acknowledge and thank all our sustaining sponsors: Hecla, Agnico Eagle, Franco-Nevada, Hatch, and Teck. It is with their support we maintain our enduring presence within the Canadian mining industry. Thank you to all our sponsors for their generous contributions to the success of this year's annual dinner and induction ceremony.